everyone, I'm Jennifer Allan, and welcome to Spirit Basics, the show for both the beginner and the avid connoisseur of fine spirits.
And I'm Stephen Olson. Today's show will be our second look at brandy, but today we're going to specifically look at cognac.
Now, in the last episode, you explained that cognac is a type of brandy, but not all brandies can be cognac. Why is that?
Well, brandy, remember, is fermented and distilled fruit of any kind from anywhere, but cognac must be made from grapes that are grown, fermented, and distilled near the city of Cognac on the Charente River in the Cognac region of France.
Now, it's kind of sounding like a little bit like tequila and scotch, one specific spirit from a specific place.
Well, it is exactly that. It is a specific spirit from a specific place. It is a very unique, very important style of brandy, and consequently, there are strict rules and regulations to protect the name. It's all about protecting this name because people are making it elsewhere and they're imitating the style and they're calling it cognac. And interestingly enough, the name has only been protected since the early 1900s. Think of it this way. To be called cognac, it must be from cognac.
So protecting the name, is that more of a marketing thing, or is there a little bit more to it than that?
It's much more historically based than that. If you think back a couple of hundred years, the Huguenots were forced to flee France because of religious persecution. And consequently, they went to many of the major cities around the world. And that's how people learned about cognac, is it was the beverage they took with them and traded. But it goes much further back than that. The Romans actually planted grapes in this very special place because of the unique climate and the unique soil type. And for centuries, there's been this system of grower, fermenter, distiller, and then the merchants and the negociants. Now, many times over the course of history, the merchants had the opportunity to buy up all of the vineyards, but instead they decided to preserve this unique culture. Think of this time in 1780s, there was a horrible frost. They could have bought up all the vineyards, but instead they helped rebuild the area. During phylloxera is a great example, which we'll talk about later, where, again, they could have bought up all of the vineyards, but instead preserved this culture. If you think about it this way, making cognac is indeed the basis for the culture of this very special region. And protecting the name cognac is basically protecting that culture.
Well, for more on the history behind cognac, we turn now to our master mixologist, Dale Degroff.
We've talked a lot about brandies of the world, and now we come to the star of the show, cognac. Cognac is the king of brandies. And cognac was almost completely wiped out in the late 19th century with a phylloxera blight that wiped out the vines of most of continental Europe. As a matter of fact, it's a most unlikely story how they solved the problem. A French scientist named Pierre Viala was traveling in the United States, and when he arrived in Denison, Texas, of all places, met with an American scientist, and the two of them discovered together that by grafting French vines onto resistant American roots, they could solve the blight problem of phylloxera. And that's what they did. But it was many, many years before cognac, and by the way, cognac never came back to the same levels of production that it had had pre-phylloxera. I had the very good fortune of having a taste of pre-phylloxera cognac, to be exact, a Napoleon 1816 with my dear friend Salvatore Calabrese, who has one of the world's largest collection of pre-phylloxera cognacs. First at the Lanesborough Hotel, where he used to be located, and soon to be at his own bar, Salvatore's, in London, England. His wonderful book describes how to enjoy the aromas of cognac, opening the spice cabinet. He describes it at your home, and he says, just imagine those spices that come wafting out from that cabinet when you put your nose over the glass. Don't breathe through your nose, breathe through your mouth. It's a wonderful story, how to enjoy the aroma of cognac. Cognac, by the way, was there for the very beginnings of the cocktail. From the brandy juleps of the South, which we talked about before, to the great Sazerac cocktail of New Orleans, because the cognac that was imported to the United States of America in the 19th century was called Sazerac des Forges et Filles. And it was from that name, Sazerac, that morphed this great classic American whiskey cocktail called the Sazerac cocktail, which I will make for you. Cognac has inspired a lot of artisan distillers in California and in Oregon to try to reproduce a alembic-style brandy in the tradition of cognac. Of course, they don't have the deep blending stocks that they have in cognac, but they are in fact producing some extraordinarily interesting brandies out there these days in California and in Oregon. Some of them are RMS and Germain Raban, Dry Creek from Oregon. There's another young brandy maker named Jörg Rupf from St. George Spirits, making some really wonderful things. Cognac is an ongoing story.
Up next, we'll tell you how cognac is made.
And our spirit insiders, Morgen and Scott, continue their search for knowledge in the spirit world. That's when Spirit Basics returns. Welcome back to Spirit Basics. It's time now to talk about how cognac is made.
Yes, but before we can even talk about how it's made, I think we first have to talk about the ingredients and where these ingredients come from. Now, cognac is made from grapes, and the grapes that grow in the Cognac region of France are predominantly Uni Blanc, with some Colombard, and also a great grape Fol Blanche, which makes fabulous brandies, and that's actually a pre-phylloxera grape that we're trying to bring back right now. There are 6 different crus, or growing areas within the Cognac region. And the most important for you to know that you see on labels from once in a while are Grand Champagne, Petit Champagne, and Bordeaux. And these areas are classified predominantly by their microclimates and their soil types. And I just want to spend a second on that soil because I use the word champagne, and I don't want people to be confused that it's champagne. It is the same word, but it comes from the Italian campagna, and the campagna means countryside, and it describes this particular type of soil, this chalk soil. Interestingly enough, the Romans planted grapes in Jerez, in Cognac, in Loire, in Chablis, in Champagne, and all of these regions have a similar chalk soil content.
So, like Scotch, does this need to spend a certain amount of time in oak before you can really call it cognac?
It absolutely does. A minimum of 2 years in oak, but it also needs to spend a specific time in a specific type of oak. We call it Limousin oak from the Limousin forest, and it actually imparts a very elegant style to the cognac, and we'll talk more later about what the flavors are in cognac. But I want people to understand that in the North American continent, we would rarely see a cognac that is less than 4 or 5 years old, and quite honestly, we'll see them up to 50 and 60 years old over here. And oftentimes on the bottles, we see these designations, proprietary names, but oftentimes you see VS, VSOP, and XO. But rather than me getting into that, for a more detailed explanation of both the distillation process and this complex classification system, let's turn to our spirit guide.
When it comes to cognac, we all love to get worked up about and talk about these age designations that exist on the labels, the VSs, the VSOPs, and the XOs. Yeah, they're important. There's no question about that. We need to understand what they mean, and also, I would have to admit, need to understand that they're not exactly what you're hoping to learn from that label. Let me explain. A VS means very special, all right? Now, how special is that? Well, in general, it means that cognac is probably about 4 years old. And it's probably spent about 2.5 years or so in barrel during that time. Might be 3 years, it depends. I know that doesn't help you a great deal, but let's go a little further. Let's talk VSOP, very special old pale. That's about 5 years old before you get it. And an XO would have to be 6 years old or older. The reason that I say that these terms don't help you so much is that 4 years or 5 years isn't really old enough to me for a cognac to become great. That a VS, quite frankly, most of the time is pretty simple stuff and not a lot of special stuff happening in most of the VSOPs out there as well. When you get to the XO level, very few of these are actually just 6 years old. Most of them are 10 years old or 15 years old or 20 years old. You see, what makes cognac so special is the soil, as we described it. That allows it to age a long time in barrel and retain its fruitiness and become, I think, a very special brandy after 20 or 25 years.
Well, now that we've taken a look at the history, the origins, and the process behind making cognac, it's time for an inside look.
And our spirit insiders, Morgen and Scott, are on a quest to find out more about cognac.
Thanks, Steve and Jennifer. I'm down here at Winefest for part 2 of our look at brandy, the king of brandy, cognac. What is the difference between cognac and brandy? Can't they be considered the same thing?
In a sense, yeah. All cognac is brandy, but not all brandy is cognac, I think is what's most often said. Cognac is brandy from the Cognac area of France. So it's made only in a limited area inside of France, and it's only made in special ways. They can only use pot stills. It's a very high quality standard of brandy.
Would you ever drink a brandy if you had the choice between a brandy and a cognac? Is there some brandies that you would choose over a cognac?
I don't think so. I might throw it in my coffee, like cafe corretto, like I throw a grappa in, but I would never use a cognac in a coffee. So I want to savor the taste of cognac and the flavor of cognac.
Now, what about cooking with cognac?
Well, food is always, the sum of its parts, and the higher quality cognac you use, the higher quality food you're going to get out of it. But generally, people tend to use the lower price cognacs because it is very expensive. If you're going to, be using an XO cognac in your food, you better make sure you're really going to notice the difference. Most people use VS, and VS works really well. It does get concentrated in the cooking process, so it really gives great flavor.
What do you think of all the different VS and VSOP and XOs and all these different designations for cognac? Do you think that maybe that can confuse the customer a little bit?
It shouldn't, but sometimes it does. It's pretty straightforward. VS is the least expensive, and it really, if you look at the price tag of the product, you kind of get an idea. VS is very superior. It's used for. It's a great one to use for drinks, and it's a good one to use in food. VSOP is more an after dinner one. It's a very nice cognac to have on its own. And if you really want to go out and spend the money and really have something super special, go for XO, the extra old.
But now what about VS and VSOP and XO and all these different classifications for cognac? You start off with the lower end with the VS. Is that something that maybe if you were going to mix you should, or is it just kind of something that no, you shouldn't do it at all?
No, it's becoming more and more popular, especially in Europe, and it's slowly taking on here in North America to mix your VS and your VSOP with juice and soda and stuff and make it a long drink. And that's just to broaden the appeal of cognac, because cognac has a very small demographic. It's very few people that do drink it. And so that's how you get women, for example, to drink cognac, is to soften the taste of the spirit.
Well, the king of brandies prevailed. Everybody knew about cognacs down here, and we're going to find out next week if they know about its rustic cousin Armagnac. For now, back to you, Steve and Jennifer.
Yeah, nothing like a nice snifter of cognac by the fireplace after a hard day of skiing.
Come back to us here.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That does sound nice, though.
Doesn't it, though? Let's go.
Up next, we get a lesson on how to enjoy cognac and how to use it in some of your favorite drinks. That's when Spirit Basics returns.
Spirit Basics is brought to you in part by Willow Park Wines and Spirits.
Welcome back to Spirit Basics, the show for everyone who wants to learn more about the world's greatest cocktails. Time now for us to take a look at how to enjoy cognac.
Earlier, you talked about the different vineyard areas of cognac, but does each have its own unique flavor?
It does, actually. If you think of Grand Champagne and Petit Champagne, they're generally considered to be the best areas. And that's really because of the soil type and the microclimate, creating in the grapes a little higher acid and a little more complexity, which basically means that they last longer in oak.
Is that a good thing?
It's actually very, very important in that in cognac, that's really what it's all about. You see, we have the oak-driven flavors and also the flavors that come from time in oak. And also Borderie, I just want to mention, brings a fruity floral quality to the cognacs that I really, really adore. Now, from the grapes in cognac, we get a lemon, orange, apple, pear, and maybe some earthiness. From the oak barrels themselves, we get vanilla, butterscotch, caramel, cinnamon, clove. From time in oak, or rancio, which is what the cognac says, call this time in oak, we get the aged dried fruits, the ripe fruits of prunes and apricots, sometimes nuts like hazelnuts or chestnuts, and dried flowers like roses. Sometimes there's an earthy quality, but together, all of these flavors make cognac so complex that it truly commands the respect of anyone who appreciates a fine spirit.
Well, for more on how to appreciate a fine cognac, we're joined by our spirit advisor.
Cognac, the king of brandies, right? I mean, for many people, it's the king of spirits, for crying out loud. And it comes in complexions VS, VSOP, XO. VS, very special, VSOP, very special, pale. Hang on a minute, those are English words. Isn't this French? Well, yeah, okay, cognac is French. The words are English because the primary market for years was the British. And so they chose these British words, English words, to send that message. But hang on a minute again. Very special old pale. Isn't great old cognac dark in color and rich? Why would they brag about it being pale? Well, 150 years ago, people used caramel, which they still use today, to set color, but they'd use it to darken them up. They'd even use fig juice sometimes to make these really, really dark in color and make it look older than it is. And to say it was a VSOP was to say it isn't that old, and we certainly haven't cheated, okay? It still has some fresh, fruity character to it, and it is the flavor of VSOP, which should be honey and caramel. And by the time I get to an XO, I should get to nuts and chocolate and raisins and all sorts of dried fruits and fruitcake and all sorts of wild things like that. I should get very rich and concentrated in that fashion. And if I'm going to enjoy that kind of a cognac, I need it in a glass like this where I can capture some flavors. It might be a slightly smaller glass, but it will not be over a flame. Because if I put it over a flame, all I'm going to do is volatilize the alcohol and not smell the beautiful cognac.
Our master mixologist, Dale Degroff, joins us now with a lesson on how to make a cocktail with cognac.
Cognac. Cognac is a big, big story. It is the king of brandies. And as I said once before in this series, cognac is brandy, but brandy is not cognac by any stretch of the imagination. Cognac. I'm going to make a cocktail with cognac today, and a lot of people might think, oh my God, a cocktail with cognac. But let me give you a little bit of insight into making cocktails with cognac, and there are lots of them, by the way. The one I'm going to make today is called the Millennium, and it's my own, but there are a lot of other cognac cocktails. I'm going to use Courvoisier VS, and I suggest that when you're making cocktails with cognac, VS might be a good call. We don't want to go to a, like the Delamain here, which is a Grand Champagne, which means the grapes come from only the very center of the region of cognac. Very desirable. Courvoisier also makes a Grand Champagne, but I'm going to use a category called VS, which means very special, which means that the grapes come from several of the areas within cognac rather than from the center area where the best grapes come from, Grand Champagne. So, let's start with the cognac. A shot. And 3/4 of a shot of, you can use any orange liqueur you want. Orange Curacao would work fine, triple sec would work fine. After all, Cointreau would work fine. I'm going to use Grand Marnier, because Grand Marnier and cognac are a nice combination. There's actually a drink called the French Connection. Let's do 3/4 of a shot of the Grand Marnier. I want a dash of bitters. And now, this is the kicker. I'm going to use pineapple juice. You're saying, oh my God, pineapple juice. Well, actually, believe it or not, pineapple juice and cognac is an interesting and pretty wonderful match. So I have 4 ingredients here. I'm going to shake up. I'm going to chill this glass down a little bit here. And by the way, I created this drink for the Millennium bottling of Courvoisier, and so I called it the Millennium Cocktail. And after going through several versions of this and finally settling on this, I was going through an old 1948 cocktail book. I found a drink called the East India Cocktail, and there it was, big as life, cognac, pineapple, curacao. And I thought, oh, everything old is new again. So let's prepare our chilled glass here, and you'll notice something about these wonderful cognac, pineapple drinks. They do have that little layer of foam on top that's so pretty. And now, I'm going to grate a little fresh nutmeg on. By the way, don't ever use nutmeg out of a bottle, because nutmeg out of a bottle has died many, many years ago. Once you grate it, it starts to die. It's like tea. It needs to be used right away. And I'm going to finish with a little bit of orange peel. Stephen, Jennifer?
Another Dale Degroff original, certainly demonstrating the versatility of cognac.
And the drink looks pretty good too.
It is, it is.
After the break, we'll find out if we can cook with cognac. That's when Spirit Basics returns. Welcome back to Spirit Basics. We're in the kitchen and we're joined by our spirit chef, Chef Allan. Great to see you again.
It's great to see you, Jennifer.
Now today we're talking about cooking with cognac, and cognac is the king of brandy. But what does it bring to a recipe?
Well, for the same reason it's the king of brandy in your snifter, it's going to be the king of brandy in your kitchen.
when you put your nose into it, you're going to get a beautiful vanilla, caramely, and other sort of complex taste from the wood that it's aged in, and that's what it's going to bring to the dishes that you add it to.
How does it compare with a wine?
Well, people always say when you're adding wine, you're adding depth. What they mean by that is a flavor that lingers on your palate after you have it. But when we're talking depth, Cognac's in the deep end of the swimming pool here. It's really going to do that. It's going to actually make it to the back end of your mouth.
All right, so we have a couple examples here of some dishes with cognac in them. Can you tell us about these carrots?
Well, carrots are an underrated vegetable, and what they bring to this dish is a sweetness and a really nice color to the plate. And what we've done is we've added almost dessert-like things to them, honey and cinnamon, and then some cognac, and then we baked them. And you can see and you can smell just how gorgeous they are. And when you bite into them, they've got infused with that cognac flavor.
You can really smell the cinnamon and the warmth just coming off that
Warmth
dish.
is a good word.
Now, what are the best dishes, in your opinion, that cognac should be used with?
Well, it's interesting because it's actually dishes that are in themselves complex or deep. So cognac's often used in peppercorn sauces, things like mushrooms, some game meats when you're braising or adding flavor, but also things like shellfish. So it's good with crab and it's good with lobster, which you'd think have their own flavors, but cognac just enhances them, brings them up even more.
And I know we have a crab soup here.
Yeah, and you can smell this, and you can smell we've got a cream crab soup, so it's got crab and it's got butterfat in it. But what you want to do with a soup is right before you plate it, when it's hot, you just want to add a little tablespoon of cognac to it. And right off the bat, you're going to get that on your nose. And you just want to add that in. And, oh, can you smell that? I mean, it's just fantastic. So what we'll do is we'll just plate this up, and then to finish it, just to give it a little bit more depth, as if there isn't enough in that, we're going to put a little bit of nutmeg in there, some fresh ground nutmeg, and now if you can smell that, that's heaven in a bowl.
That does smell like heaven in a bowl. So overall, you're saying that when you're using cognac in a dish, you're just going to end up with a bolder flavor.
Absolutely. Depth, depth, depth. That's what you're going to get out of it.
Great. Well, to try these recipes at home, you want to log on to our website for the recipes. Over to you now, Stephen.
Thanks, Jennifer. You can not only cook with cognac, but I can tell you matching cognac with food can be a lot of fun. That's it for this episode of Spirit Basics. Join us next week when we explore the world of Armagnac. I'm Stephen Olson, and for Jennifer, Allan, and our entire team here at Spirit Basics, we'll see you next week. Santé.
Special thanks to Willow Park Wine and Spirits, whose dedication to providing knowledge, awareness, and service to their customers has made this show possible.